I'm from Seattle, Washington, and was in my junior year of high school. Our teacher was finishing off the last lesson when we heard screaming outside in the hallway. Whoever was screaming got quiet abruptly, and then we could hear a group of screams that sounded 10 times more panicked and horrifying. We could hear kids running and teachers yelling for security. I figured I was safe. I was mostly hidden until I saw this guy outside our class window. He was wearing these grubby clothes that looked like he'd stitched them together from rags. His hair was a mess, like a bird's nest, and he had drool coming out of the corner of his mouth. In his hand, he was carrying a machete that was dripping blood. He kept walking back and forth, like he was hunting someone. My heart dropped to my stomach. I pressed myself against the lockers and tried not to move or breathe. I was way away from his line of sight. I was tracking his movement when my eyes caught a Tyler Brooks standing frozen at the end of the corridor. Tyler was in my grade. He had been making my life hell since middle school. Countless times he'd called me names, shoved me into lockers, dumped my lunch tray, and made everyone laugh at me. I hated him. But right now, he looked nothing like the guy who bullied me every day. He looked terrified, like a deer caught in headlights, and he was trembling with fear. The man with the machete hadn't seen him yet, and was still pacing in the middle of the hallway, but he would see him soon. Tyler was completely exposed with nowhere to hide. I could have stayed hidden. Tyler never would have done the same for me, but I couldn't just watch a kid die. I looked around and picked up a metal water bottle on the floor. Someone must have dropped it. I grabbed it and I threw it as hard as I could down the opposite hallway away from Tyler. It hit the ground with a loud clang and echoed through the empty corridor. The man with the machete stopped pacing. He turned toward the sound and started walking that direction. I hurriedly sprinted toward Tyler. When he saw me coming, his eyes got even wider. I grabbed his arm and pulled him toward the nearest door. It was a storage room. I shoved him inside, followed, and locked the door as quietly as I could. We both pressed against the wall. Both of us were breathing hard, trying to stay quiet. I could hear footsteps in the hallway. The man was coming back. He'd realized the water bottle was a distraction. The footsteps got closer and stopped right outside our door. I could see Tyler's face in the dim light. He was hiccuping, with tears running down his face. He grabbed my sleeve and held on tight, like I was the only thing keeping him alive. We stayed like that as the doorknob rattled. A man was trying to get in. My heart was hammering in my chest. The doorknob rattled again before footsteps retreated away. We stayed in that storage room for what felt like hours, waiting for him to jump the door and get us. Tyler was still holding my sleeve real hard. It looked like he'd pass out any second. I could hear sirens outside getting louder. Minutes ticked by, and the cops arrived. I could hear a commotion outside. We waited until they knocked and told us it was fine to step out. I unlocked the door and opened it slowly. 2 officers were in the hallway. They asked if we were hurt. We said no, and they walked us outside. The parking lot was full of ambulances and police cars, with students and teachers everywhere. Some were crying, and some were being treated by paramedics. I saw my mom running towards me. She grabbed me and held me so tight I couldn't breathe. Tyler's mom was there too. She ran to him, and he just collapsed into her arms and started sobbing. His mom was crying too, and asking if he was okay and if he was hurt. Across the parking lot, Tyler looked at me. Our eyes met. He was still crying, but he gave me a nod of gratitude. I looked away. I didn't know what to say or how to process any of it. 4 people died that day, 2 students and 2 teachers. The man with the machete was some deranged guy who'd broken into the school. Police shot him when he refused to drop his weapon. They said we were lucky and that it could have been worse, but it didn't feel lucky. It felt horrible. The next day I went back to school. Everything felt different. The hallways were quieter and students were talking in whispers. I was walking back to my locker when I heard someone behind me. "Noah." I turned around. It was Tyler, standing there, looking at the ground with his hands in his pockets. "Hey." He looked up. "Thanks for yesterday. You saved my life." "Yeah, no problem." Tyler nodded and then sat down on the bench next to mine. Soon, it became our thing. We started talking about the small stuff. He stopped bullying me and started defending me when other people did. School lockdowns aren't meant to be special, but I earned a friend in a bully. Sometimes, the worst days change everything. Sometimes the person you hate becomes the person you trust most. because you went through hell together, and you both made it out alive. I was in my senior year of high school. It was a regular Wednesday morning in English class. I was sitting in the back row, half paying attention, when the lockdown alarm went off. At first, everyone thought it was a drill. We'd done them a million times, but when the gunshots boomed, a wave of panic washed over. Our teacher, Mrs. Patterson, started freaking out and telling everyone to get away from the windows and hide. Some kids ducked under desks, and some ran to the corner. I was trying to get to the closet when I heard the classroom door slam open. I turned around as Jason Miller walked in. He and I had a rivalry going back to middle school. He had been jealous and obsessed with me getting things he wanted. He always thought he was better than everyone else and needed to be the center of attention. His ego took the fall when Emma, my girlfriend, turned him down last year and started seeing me. None of us ever thought he was dangerous enough to hold a gun someday. Mrs. Patterson screamed as Jason pointed the gun at her and told her to shut up. She did. So did all of us. "Ethan, come here," he hissed. My blood turned to ice and mouth dried up. "I said come here," he snapped as most of the students flinched. He raised the gun and aimed at my chest. I gulped and slowly walked toward him, shaking. When I got close, he grabbed my shoulder and shoved me against the wall before he pulled the trigger and shot me. My shoulder tore open. I screamed at the top of my lungs as unbearable pain exploded. I fell, gasping for air, while Jason stood over me, snickering. "You know what's funny? Everyone's going to remember this day and Jason Miller for years." My vision was blurring, and blood was soaking my shirt. Kids were crying, and Mrs. Patterson was begging him to stop. He ignored all of them. "I already got Jake," Jason chuckled. "I'll hunt Marcus after you. Gonna send them all up there, one by one." He pointed the gun at the ceiling. "Then, I'm gonna go get Emma. That'd be my ultimate payback." He was talking about murder like taking life was a game. I was fighting to stay conscious. The pain was unbearable, but I had to stall him. "You're not fearless," I whimpered, gasping for air. Jason leaned down. "You're not fearless. You're just a coward with a gun. Shut up!" He kicked me in the stomach. I shrieked, rolling over. Make me prove that you're fearless." He raised an eyebrow. His ego was taking over. "Russian roulette. You and me. If you're really fearless, you'll do it." Jason smiled. "Do you really think that'll save you?" "What? Too scared to try, huh? That's what everyone will remember. Jason Miller was a coward." His jaw clenched. Pride was everything for him, and he couldn't stand being called a chicken. "Fine." Mrs. Patterson got up, but retreated when Jason aimed at her. Afterwards, he checked the gun and emptied all bullets except one, and spun the chamber. "I'll go first." He put it to his head and pulled the trigger. It was empty. He laughed and pointed the gun at my head. I closed my eyes as he pulled the trigger. It was empty. We went back and forth. Both of us survived until only one bullet was left. Fortunately, it was Jason's turn. He slowly lifted the gun to his head. His hand was shaking now. He exhaled, looking at me, and burst out laughing. "You think I'm stupid enough to hurt myself over a dumb challenge?" My breathing was coming in rasps now. He aimed at me. I closed my eyes, waiting for the bullet to pierce my flesh. Before it could happen, the door exploded open, and cops stormed in. Within seconds, Jason was tackled over. They slammed him on the ground. I could hear the sound of his gun dropping and the handcuffs being put on. My vision was getting blurred. I felt someone beside me, putting pressure on my shoulder. "Stay with me, kid. The ambulance is on the way. You're gonna be okay." The pain was getting worse, and everything was going fuzzy. I could hear Jason screaming and fighting against the cops. They held him pinned down with their knees. Everything after that is blurry. Paramedics rushed in and lifted me onto a stretcher. My mom held my hand as I was taken to the ER. I woke up 2 days later in a hospital bed. The bullet had gone clean through my shoulder and missed anything major. I was lucky. That's what everyone kept telling me, because Jason's arrogant ass had stolen 3 kids from their parents. Jake, my best friend since kindergarten, was one of them. Jason had found him in the hallway before he got to my classroom and shot him in the chest. Marcus survived, but he's paralyzed now. Emma wasn't even at school that day. She was sick. Jason never got to her and never got to finish his plan. He was arrested and charged with 3 counts of murder and multiple counts of attempted murder. The trial was all over the news for months. He loved seeing his face on TV. It was exactly what he wanted all along. His lawyers tried to say he was mentally ill and that he didn't understand what he was doing and he needed help, not prison. But I testified. I told the jury about the Russian roulette and about how calm he was the whole time and how he planned everything out. The jury didn't buy the insanity defense and found him guilty on all counts. He got life in prison without the possibility of parole. I graduated from high school 2 months ago. Emma and I broke up. She couldn't handle what happened. I don't blame her. I still have nightmares. I see Jason standing over me, smiling, and the gun clicking empty over and over. Moreover, I see Jake's pleading face, waiting for someone to save him. I'm from Sacramento, California, and I went to this public school in our vicinity. I was in 6th grade and had lots of friends that I loved hanging out with. It was one of the reasons I loved showing up every day. That Tuesday morning was meant to be yet another regular day. I had language arts 3rd period and we were supposed to go to the library for research. My teacher walked us down the hall and we all spread out looking for books. I was in the back corner looking at books about ancient Egypt for my project. All of a sudden, I heard loud gunshots somewhere in the school. Initially, I figured it was just construction or maybe something busted, until the screaming started, and I saw people hauling butt down the hallways. My teacher screamed at us to take cover. A few kids bolted toward the library office, and others ducked behind desks. I saw the bottom shelf in the corner with barely enough space to fit if I made myself really small. Without thinking twice, I crawled underneath and pulled my knees to my chest, making myself as tiny as possible. The screaming outside was getting louder as the gunshots kept booming. They all sounded much closer now. I could hear people running right past the library. It went on for a few minutes before the screaming stopped, and everything went dead quiet. I was shaking like a leaf. I badly wanted to get home, but stayed glued under the shelf, trying not to move or make a single peep, as my mom had instructed I should do in such situations. I have no idea how long I was hiding there before I heard the library doors squeak open and heavy boots walk in. I held my breath and tried to shrink in on myself. The footsteps were slow and super deliberate, like someone was taking their time walking between the shelves. I could hear heavy breathing, almost like they'd been running or something. Seconds later, books started clattering to the floor from the shelves. I covered my mouth so I wouldn't make a sound as the footsteps kept moving, getting closer and closer to my hiding spot. I could hear a man's voice talking to himself. I couldn't make out words, but he sounded pissed off. The footsteps were going back and forth by the same shelves. I finally realized he wasn't actually looking for anyone. He was hiding too. When I listened carefully, I could hear faint police sirens. Could it be that he was hiding from the cops and had no idea I was even here? Minutes passed. The pacing stopped, and total silence prevailed. I stayed frozen under the shelf, with my legs cramping bad and my back hurting from being curled up. But I didn't move and barely breathed. Who? The guy suddenly jerked up as if he had sensed a presence. The shuffling resumed. He was really searching now, looking through shelves and checking behind desks and opening cabinets. I was about to cry. My heart was pounding so loud I was sure he could hear it too. I clamped my hand over my chest, but that didn't help one bit. He was just one shelf away now. I could see his boots through the gap, moving slowly. He'd stop and check before he moved again. I had to move. Pronto. I knew if I stayed put, he'd spot me in a second. I quickly wiped my face and started crawling inch by inch, keeping low and moving under the shelves toward the exit. The carpet was scraping my elbows. Suddenly, my backpack snagged on a shelf and made a tiny hiss. I froze. The boots stopped. He'd heard it too. I kept crawling, faster now. I didn't care about being quiet anymore. I could hear him moving faster too, searching frantically. I reached the end of the shelves. The exit door was maybe 10 feet away. I could see it and just had to get there. The boots were right behind me and getting closer. I stood up, ran, and shoved the door open with both hands as hard as I could. Right then, a gunshot exploded inches away from my ear. The bullet slammed into the wall right next to my head, and pieces of plaster hit my face. I screamed, but didn't stop. I kept running out the door and down the hallway. I could hear yelling behind me and several footsteps. The cops had made it inside. "Get down! Get down!" one of them yelled. I dropped to the floor and put my hands over my head. I heard more yelling and scuffling, and the sound of someone being tackled, followed by handcuffs clicking. "You okay, girl? You're safe now." A cop patted my back seconds later. I couldn't talk or move. I just lay there on the floor shaking. They carried me outside. There were ambulances everywhere and police cars. Parents were screaming and crying. My mom was one of them. The moment she saw me, she grabbed me and held me so tight I couldn't breathe. She was sobbing and saying my name over and over while I stood there numb. 5 kids died that day. 12 were injured. The man who came into the library was the shooter. He'd run out of ammunition and was hiding from the police when I was under the shelf. If I'd stayed there, he would have found me. He only had 1 bullet left, and he would have used it. My mom pulled me out of that school a month later. She decided I'd be homeschooled till I reached university. I miss the school days and hanging out with my friends, but I can't handle being in buildings with lots of people or loud noises. Can't handle silence either, because silence reminds me of hiding under the shelf waiting to be found. I hate what he did to all of us without actually having to kill. The worst part is knowing that it could happen again, anywhere, anytime.